It's getting pretty tough to get by in America right now. And I would say with every single year that passes, it seems to be getting harder. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. I mean, right now, specifically, AI is kind of taking a lot of jobs away. I think that's going to continue over the next 4 or 5 years. I think we're going to see a lot more of that because they're standing up infrastructure for AI all over the world and specifically all over the country. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to continue because they're investing billions. I'm talking $500 billion over the next 4 or 5 years into AI infrastructure to scale AI. And that's going to equate to AI taking more jobs away, so things are going to get harder. I believe that the cost of goods and services is probably going to continue to rise year after year. I don't know if there's anything that's going to slow that down. I hope there is. But the way it's looking right now, things don't seem to be coming down. And a lot of times what happens is the price of things will go up. It gets to a certain point and it never goes back down to what it was because they know at that point people are willing to pay the inflated prices. So what incentive do they have to lower the prices back down to normal, even if inflation comes down? I don't think we'll ever see prices that we saw 10, 15 years ago. I just don't think it's going to happen. Another big reason that it's getting harder and harder to get by is because wages have not increased at all. As a matter of fact, since 1970, they've actually gone down some because if you adjust for inflation, the average household back then was making about $77,000 a year. Now it's only about $74,000. That's not good, considering the price of everything has gone up. Again, it's just getting harder overall to make ends meet, but there's one thing in particular that I believe is making it harder for people to get by, and that is that most of us, most Americans in general, are very financially illiterate. And I'm speaking from experience because I too, most of my life have been very financially illiterate. Now, I've set myself up to be in a very good position right now financially because I've always had a scarcity mindset and I've always saved a ton of money. And that alone has allowed me to retire from the workforce by the age of 39. I own 2 homes. I now have investments and stuff that I've started. I've started working on building some businesses for myself on top of all that. But throughout my entire life, I was one of those people that was very financially illiterate. And to me, that's crazy because I actually have quite a bit of education. And throughout all of that education, through the public education system, I did not learn anything about how to get by, about the fundamental things that we need to survive in life. And I'm talking like practical skills, practical knowledge, money, finances, investing, saving money, living frugally, balancing a checkbook. None of these things. And I would say that if you want to learn that kind of stuff throughout life, you're going to need to get it from your parents because getting it from the public education system probably isn't going to happen. And the bad part about that is that now, because of the current state of things, both parents have to work to make ends meet. So that means that's less time that you're going to be able to spend with your kids, teaching them these fundamental life skills. Keeping in mind that you would only be able to teach your kids these fundamental life skills if you yourself was trained and educated on these things. And I can tell you right now that my parents weren't. They didn't invest. They just lived their lives like most people do. They worked a 9 to 5 for their entire lives until they were old enough to retire. And then they got out. And that's what most people do. That is exactly the way everything is set up. And I'm 100% convinced that it's set up this way by design. It is designed to keep us cogs in the machine. We are trained from birth to find a role that we fit into in society. And we're trained and programmed to stay in that role for our entire lives until we get to the age of retirement, at which point then we only have 10 years left because the average life expectancy now is between 74 if you're a male and 77 years if you're a female. So what kind of life is that? What kind of life is it that you're going to stay stuck working a 9 to 5 your entire life, putting off all the things in life that you probably want to do until one day you're able to get out and then you're too old to do those things? That is not a life I want to live, and that's not a life most people want to live, but again, that's the way things are set up. And something else that I believe we get very, very wrong is our view on money in general. I mean, think about this for your own life. Think back on your life and think about the way that you've always viewed money. For me, it was always that money is very hard to come by. It's very hard to get. I had to trade my time for money, and in most cases that meant working my fingers to the bone, giving up a very large part of my life so that I could acquire money. Because that is, again, kind of the way we're brought up. We're brought up that time equals money. The more time you give and the harder you work, the more money you're going to make. That has not been true for me though, because I spent almost 20 years of my life working in the corporate world. I did climb the corporate ladder. I made a name for myself, but I wasn't making that much money. Even when I got out of the workforce, I still was not making six figures. I had never had a six-figure salary. But I believed that if I kept pushing myself and I gave up more of my time and more of my life, eventually I would get there. And after 20 years, I never did. And think about that for a second. Working in the corporate world for one of the largest companies in the country, and after 20 years, I still did not have a six-figure salary. And I was doing very high-level work. I was traveling all over the world and had been for almost 2 decades. Yet somehow, after all that work, and after giving up so much of my time and so much of myself, I still wasn't worth six figures to these companies. To me, that is baffling, and that should not be the way things work. But again, that's kind of how things are set up. But what I've learned from that experience is, in order for me to make that kind of money, I had to move on, which is really kind of sad to think about. The fact that there is very little loyalty with these companies anymore. These days, we're basically treated like a number. We come in, we're assigned a dollar amount, and there's only so much room to grow. There is a cap on each and every one of us. And that cap is going to be determined by the company you're working for and how much they think you're worth. But now that I've gotten away from that life and I've started to take more risks, I have begun to realize the truth about money. And the truth about money is that money is not scarce. It is very, very abundant. And the people that are rich, the people that make all the money, they know that. And that is exactly why they have so much wealth. They view money as something that's disposable. It's like monopoly money to them. They know that if they get rid of it and they lose it, they can always get more. And that is actually 100% a fact. And in general, I would say that the way we view money is completely backwards. I mean, think about retirement, for example. This is another big wake-up call I had. The common notion is that you need millions of dollars to be able to retire in today's economy. But the fact of the matter is, you don't. And I'm living proof of that. I did not retire as a millionaire. And from my experience, you do not need that kind of money to be able to exit the workforce. The only reason you would need that kind of money is if you were blowing a significant amount of money and you didn't have anything to replace that money. But what I've learned is that you could literally retire on a single dollar if your investments are replenishing the funds that you're spending. As long as you can establish a couple streams of income that ideally work passively for you in the background and that replenish the funds that are leaving your bank account, that is all you need. And as long as that money that's coming in is enough for you to break even, you don't need to touch a single cent of your retirement money. So in that case, you don't need $1 million. As a matter of fact, technically, you don't need a single cent. You could retire on $0. And that's where I believe a lot of people get it wrong, and it keeps them working their entire lives, is that there's this idea that when you get out, you don't do anything. And your only means of survival is the money that you've made throughout your career. But if you're anything like me, you didn't invest until later on in life. I didn't start investing until I was almost 40 years old. And I also didn't get a pension. So that means that my investment portfolio is very, very small. But because I believe money was very scarce and I lived very, very frugally, and I got out of debt as early as I possibly could, I was able to walk away from the workforce without having a single investment to my name. But the reason I was able to do that is because I'd reduced my expenses so low that I knew that I could survive for many decades without ever having to work again. But I did not leave the workforce to sit around and not do anything. The main reason I got out is so that I could build something for myself, so that I could build an investment portfolio, something that I could rely on for the rest of my life, something that was going to replenish the money that was leaving my account. And that concept alone is fundamentally important if you want to be able to walk away from the workforce, especially in today's economy, because things are going up and because it's getting harder to make ends meet. Even if you do retire with $1 million and you still have debt hanging over your head, then there's a pretty good chance you're going to blow through that money in a very short order, and you're probably going to have to go back to work. And that is especially true if you're trying to get out at a younger age. And that is why I truly believe one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is to grow our knowledge base, grow our skill set, learn more about investing and financial education, learn about business and things that you can do on the side while working your 9-to-5 that is going to allow you to generate more wealth for yourself. That alone is going to put you so much further ahead of the average person. But it's only going to do that if you don't have all kinds of debt hanging over your head and if you're smart about where you're actually spending your money. Because I can say for certain that the main thing that allowed me to get to where I am today is the fact that I didn't just blow my money, and that I did get out of debt as soon as I possibly could. Those two things alone have given me the freedom to be able to walk away from the workforce and not have to worry about money even if I didn't have passive income streams replenishing my bank account. Now, would that last forever? And would that be enough to get me by the rest of my life? Absolutely not. But that has given me a window of freedom where I'm now able to devote 100% of my attention, free from distractions, towards developing my skills, towards learning more about business and investing, and all these fundamental life skills that are allowing me to establish a lifestyle for myself that will support me for the rest of my life. And from my experience, walking away from the workforce is as simple as that. And ultimately, that's what it all boils down to, is just changing our perception on money, the way that we view money. Start thinking the same way that these rich people at the top think. Because again, they treat money like monopoly money. So why shouldn't we?